Good morning to everyone tuning in from the United States, and good afternoon to everyone tuning in from Europe, and good day to the rest of you around the globe. Thank you for joining this Atlantic Council event on the Three Seas Initiative. My name is General Jim Jones, United States Marine Corps retired, but still active. Among the responsibilities I have at the Atlantic Council is my role as chair of the Three Seas programming at the Council's Europe Center, and I'm assisted by some wonderful people who make my job much easier than it otherwise would be. I am personally very delighted to welcome you to this event in preparation of the Three Seas Summit and Business Forum taking place on June 20th and 21st in Riga. These events are less than 2 weeks away, and they promise to be action-forcing events. And for those of you who do not know, it bears repeating, the Three Seas Initiative is a Central and Eastern European launched and led effort to accelerate the development of cross-border transportation, energy, and digital infrastructure across the regions between the Black, Baltic, and Adriatic Seas. This initiative is all about the power of connectivity and collaboration to drive forward economic growth, strengthen economic resilience and energy security, and above all, complete the vision of Europe undivided, free, and secure. The Three Seas is more than just a vision. It's an operational undertaking established to catalyze the development of the highways, railroads, digital networks, and pipelines and power lines required for a truly single European market. The institutional core of the Three Seas is the Three Seas Initiative Investment Fund, a unique and innovative public-private partnership set up to mobilize private finance in support of the region's infrastructure projects. The fund has already been financed with over $1 billion from the member states and aims to grow to between $3 and $5 billion with private capital. I'm very proud to say that the Atlantic Council has a long history with the Three Seas Initiative dating back to its launch in 2016. Many of us, including myself, believe this initiative's relevance and urgency has been elevated by the era of geostrategic confrontation in which we find ourselves embroiled today. The economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia's unprovoked invasion of the Ukraine, Moscow's effort to use its energy exports as a weapon, and China's aggressive economic maneuvering have underscored real vulnerabilities present in Europe. Cross-border infrastructure development across the Three Seas region is a very effective means to stimulate and reinforce economic growth, diversify energy supplies, and also enhance the mobility necessary for the defense of NATO's eastern frontiers. My hope is that the Three Seas Summit and Business Forum in Riga will not only highlight the economic potentials of Central and Eastern Europe, but will also ensconce the initiative as a key element of a transatlantic strategy to reinforce the region in this age of confrontation. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce the Prime Minister of Latvia, Krišjānis Kariņš, our first conversation of the day, to discuss the geopolitical value the Three Seas brings to the transatlantic community and economic opportunity that offers investors from around the world. The Prime Minister is a true Atlanticist. He was born in Delaware to Latvian immigrants who fled Soviet occupation. He was educated in the United States, earning a PhD in linguistics, before moving to Latvia, where he quickly entered politics, serving as a party leader, a member of his nation's parliament, a member of the European Parliament, and a minister of economy. Today, he served as Prime Minister, having held this post since 2019. This month, his tasks include hosting the Three Seas Summit in Riga, together with the President of Latvia, which we eagerly look forward to. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And before I turn it over to our President and CEO, Fred Kemp, to moderate the discussion with the Prime Minister, I'd like to welcome our speakers and lay out this morning's agenda. Following our conversation with the Prime Minister, we'll turn to a discussion on the economic potential of the 3Cs initiative, moderated by Council Senior Fellow Ian Brzezinski. After that, we'll turn to the Council Senior Director for the Eurasia Center, Ambassador John Herbst, to moderate our conversation about the 3Cs in Ukraine. So welcome to all of our distinguished speakers. And with that, I turn it over to you, Fred.
Thank you very much, General Jones, and thank you particularly for your years of remarkable public service, NATO Secretary General, Marine Commandant, National Security Advisor. I don't think any human being has had all three of those positions, and we have been lucky to have you twice as our chairman, now as Chairman Emeritus of the Atlantic Council. And particularly co-chairing our 3Cs work together with Ambassador Georgette Mosbacher. I really thank you for that as well. Good morning to all of you. It's my job just to pass the baton to the Prime Minister and thank him for being here, adding my thanks to General Jones. Mr. Prime Minister, we were just in Davos at 3Cs House, the first time there was a 3Cs House in Davos. And your president was on a panel with the president of Poland and also the president of Estonia. We had incredible panels and voices all through the week trying to raise the profile of 3Cs ahead of your summit and business forum in June. We're excited to hear from you on all this and how this can enhance and reinforce prosperity in Central and Eastern Europe in light, particularly of Putin's war in Ukraine. And just to give you maximum time, let me turn the floor to you, Mr. Prime Minister, for your opening comments, and then we'll dive into a discussion. And for those on the line, you can ask questions using the Q&A function of Zoom. And I will watch also for your questions for the Prime Minister there. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Fred, and it's a great pleasure to be at the Atlantic Council again. Video link is okay, so you have the afternoon sun here, the morning sun over there. It's the same sun, I suppose. And it's always a pleasure to meet with you. And the Atlantic Council's important role in fostering the transatlantic relationship is certainly appreciated on this side of the pond. And wish you all the best in continuing your great work. The 3Cs, in my view, is all about fantastic opportunity. First of all, at its basis, it's a fantastic opportunity for investment. In the east of Europe, especially here in the Northeast, we have very vibrant economies. We're very open and looking for investments. The main goal, of course, connectivity, north to south, both physical and digital, very important. And my country is certainly very keen on not only, of course, the investment in all of those opportunities, but especially on using this platform as a way to strengthen the transatlantic bond. So behind me, there's a NATO flag, there's a European flag, the Latvian flag. They're symbolic, they're important, but as we in Europe work towards making our market more perfect, strengthening our own defense capabilities in Europe. Now we are pooling money to give weapons to Ukraine, something unthought of 4 or 5 months ago. I think it's very important to stress the transatlantic bond and the necessity to make that relationship ever stronger. And we're on the eastern flank of the European Union, the eastern flank of NATO. To the east of us is Russia. And Russia is currently waging an all-out brutal war against a country a little to the south of us, Ukraine. We've all been following that for the past, it's now over 100 days. And we, in Latvia, we've been supporting Ukraine from day one, actually from before day one, already with weapons. There were a few of us helping Ukraine before war broke out. The 3 Baltic countries, Poland, the United States, and Great Britain. And we have all been continuing. Thankfully, many other allies have joined in since. And this really changes geopolitics and changes potentially the security situation not only in Europe and in the entire world. We are increasing our defense spending to 2.5%. We're heading into the Madrid NATO summit, actually quite excited about that as well, on codifying the forward defense posture that NATO is currently developing. And this is, again, something that we are doing by investing ourselves and working with our partners. So in the 3Cs initiative in the geopolitical context becomes all the more, how should we say, important, especially because this is an initiative that ties Europe and the United States, Canada in this way, North America closer together. So wonderful opportunities. Everyone who's invested here seems to be quite happy because they're all investing ever more. We've been reaching, even in spite of COVID, which because of the war, maybe many of us are forgetting about, this is the investments coming into Latvia have been on a nice upward slope. And the opportunities are huge. I think in later panels, you'll hear from our investment agency head, Kaspars Rožkalns, in terms of the 5G. In Latvia, we have companies, everyone is making software for 5G, but we have companies also developing hardware. And this is, there's great opportunities for work in this regard. It's not starting from ground zero, it's finding companies that are very cutting edge, but still very, very nimble, given our relative size, and lots of excitement on that regard. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very excited about the 3Cs initiative, and I'm very happy to answer any and all questions if there are any.
Prime Minister Karins, thank you so much for those opening remarks. Let me start with the question of Ukraine. There's a lot of talk about Ukraine getting some sort of accelerated association with the European Union. What about the 3Cs initiative? Speaking to President Duda in Davos, I got the feeling that there is some momentum in that direction. And I just wonder whether at the at your summit in June, whether one could expect any action regarding Ukraine in that respect.
Certainly all of us who happen to be in the 3Cs are also very strongly supportive of granting Ukraine candidacy status. The momentum, the political momentum around Europe seems to be building. And I know that there was, just some weeks ago, there were various colleagues of mine in Europe that were a little hesitant, not in the sense of supporting Ukraine hesitant, but in the sense of actually joining the EU is a laborious process that takes time. And we've been emphasizing, especially here in the East, also from our own past experience, that this as a political signal will be very important for the European Union to give, to really extend the hand. So we're still negotiating, we're still working, but I certainly will continue through the summit to work towards this. And I'm not alone. Actually, all of us in the 3Cs, all of us in the East of Europe, understand also the political importance of this decision.
And so put aside for now the candidacy status question of the European Union, how about membership status of the 3Cs initiative? That would seem to be an easier course to take, but I just don't know what the path for that would be.
Yeah, they're not very different kinds of issues. Of course, the 3Cs would be easier. And I think that also this would be a significant step because we have to think about the reconstruction of Ukraine. We're now in the stage where we have to make sure that Ukraine wins and Russia loses the war. So supplying arms, supplying monies, humanitarian aid, et cetera, But we already have to start planning about the rebuilding of the infrastructure. And among that is a lot of rail infrastructure, internet infrastructure, and there will be an opportunity actually because of the devastation of war to in certain cases to really think about how something could be done better than it was before. Countries develop sort of not haphazardly, but over time, And sometimes there are things that could be done much better. Pulling Ukraine into this initiative, I think it makes a lot of not only political sense, but I think it makes sense also in terms of project development. It's an open question, but I do see the scope, especially in light of post-war Ukrainian reconstruction.
Thank you for that clear answer. We've got some questions that have come in already. Let me ask one more, and then I'm going to turn to some of the questions that have come in. You're a former businessman. So from that standpoint, can you describe the economic rationale? The increased geopolitical rationale is clear. What's the economic rationale that drives the 3Cs initiative? And if you look at the aspects of it, transport, digital, energy, what excites you the most, and what do you think it would take to really harness the free market, private international finance to drive this forward?
Well, actually, what excites me the most are companies and people on the ground in the area. Remember, in this part of Europe, you still have people who are hungry, hungry to do things better, hungry to do things in a new way, nimble in the sense of not being set in some old ways, because we all have very relatively recent experiences. It's only 30 years, but for a nation, it's a short time. That of all the infrastructure that has lots of growth potential, and we also have to think about north-south. Also military mobility is all part of that, but underneath of that, you have societies, certainly in Latvia, but I have to say you'll find in the entire region a vibrancy that you don't get, so often concentrated in one area of the world. And here, in the Baltic countries, we are very much, everyone who works here sees that the Nordics and the Baltics were very, free market oriented anyway, but on this side of the Baltic, there's that added, the French say je ne sais quoi, that extra spark that is a fantastic opportunity also for the investors coming in.
Thank you very much for that. We way back in 2015 had a paper written by General Jones. Ian Brzezinski was involved in it, calling it the North-South Corridor. And so we've been excited about this opportunity for a long time. What should we expect from the summit in June? What will be distinctive about the Riga 3C summit?
I think that what we'll see is, first of all, this will be one of the first larger meetings that are taking place now in person. I mean, post-COVID. So what we're seeing, we just recently had in Riga the NATO strategic Stratcom meeting, fully packed. And when we've been away from one another so long, you get lots of dynamism. There will be lots of contact opportunities. There will be a talk of specific projects. And I think that everyone who comes will better understand all of the opportunities, the needs, the opportunities, and getting the contacts for, in all the areas that various companies are interested, whether it's road, whether it's rail, whether it's internet, whether it's 5G on the technological side. You'll find the great vibrancy here, and the weather. If it's ever warm in Latvia, the end of June coming up to the summer solstice is nice. It's actually quite hot and smuggy for us today, well over 20 degrees, not so warm by DC standards, I suppose. But you'll get that a real impulse, and also a lot of concrete talk of concrete projects.
Thank you very much. I have a question from Zinovi Broida, and he builds on my initial question about the Ukraine perspective to be integrated into the 3Cs, according to the joint statements of Zelensky with the presidents of Moldova, Poland, and Estonia. But he takes it further, saying, taking into consideration the real role of the shortest Baltic, Mediterranean, Black Sea transport connections on Ukrainian territory across and bypass Carpathians, particularly given the agro-food production supply crisis. He also talks about the largest hydro energy accumulated station in Dniester River for further stability of the 10E system in the 3SI area. And then finally, he lists the geospatial planning digitalization for post-war sustainable development risk management. So he's not just saying it should be there, he's actually talking, and this is for main water sources in core 3SI area head river basins of Ukraine Carpathians. Now, I don't know how much you know about any of these potentials. If you do, certainly comment on them, but it just seems as though there are some just natural reasons to reach out to Ukraine, according to Zinovy, and certainly for the reconstruction period ahead that will come.
I can agree, and the challenge that we have in terms of this north-south corridor, if you pull in Ukraine, is that there's still Belarus in between. That is between Latvia, Lithuania, and Ukraine. You have Belarus, which had the faulty elections, has a very difficult situation with Lukashenko essentially losing their sovereignty to Russia with the Russian military there, and also staging invasive operations into Ukraine from Belarusian territory. To have all of this, say the rail connections for potential grain exports, for the electricity easy transmission, we would really need some rather large political changes in Belarus as well. But that does not rule out that these are all fantastic opportunities. But in terms of pure geography, when you look at the map, we still have that piece of the puzzle that needs to be, how should we say, solved, not resolved, but solved. And that would be through transformative processes within Belarus itself. Ukraine is clearly a democratic country heading in the right direction, fighting a terrible war of aggression to preserve its identity, its territory, its statehood. Belarus, in a sense, is an already occupied country that never had that war. It had a stolen election, and then the Russian troops just came in, and Lukashenko did nothing, of course, to protest, let alone to put up an opposition. With the reconstruction of Ukraine, it makes perfect sense, but with the true potential of harnessing all the opportunities, there's a challenge. I mean, even grain exports could physically, there's nothing stopping Ukrainian grain being exported through Belarus to the Baltic seaports. We have lots of export capacity. The problem is Lukashenko, the Belarusian leader, is not letting this happen. There are no sanctions against grain, but he, of course, wants to allow grain if we remove the sanctions. And this is the challenge in terms of future development of infrastructure. It becomes a little problematic, but of course there's Poland, there's lots of interconnectivity. Ukraine is now synchronized with Europe, so there's plenty of opportunities there. And I know the electric grid in and of itself. I mean, we're all in Europe, and especially in the east of Europe, moving rapidly away from Russian energy dependence. So that's a lot of new and additional infrastructure that we need to complete.
Thank you for that. You talked about grain, you talked about food exports. Let me pick up two related questions. One from Joseph Bosco, one from Alan Flowers. Joseph Bosco asks whether NATO is failing in its European and global security responsibilities by allowing Russia to dominate the Black Sea and close off Ukraine's exports to global markets. And then Alan phrases his question a little bit differently, which is the 3 Cs initiative engages with transportation matters. Why does it appear easier to get weapons into Ukraine than it is to get grain out? And in particular, why are Ukrainians claiming that it is a bureaucratic export difficulties and not necessarily transport infrastructure problems? So anyway, you see the direction of the two questions.
Yeah, well, of course, Ukrainian grain, as grain in general, it's cheaper to transport anything by ship, including grain, and they have the port facilities. Well, they've lost a few of those cities. Mariupol has been apparently completely destroyed. Odessa is still intact, but the entry into Odessa is mined also by the Ukrainians as a defensive measure against the Russians. Now, you would need to open up that sea lane. Russia is offering to work with Turkey in providing security guarantees for grain exports. Now imagine you're a Ukrainian and Russia is going to guarantee the security of the sea route if you demine the port of Odessa. In other words, you take away your defenses, and that the power that will guarantee that everything is fine is the same power that's trying to wipe you off the map. That's a no-go. Okay, what should NATO's role here be? This is a very serious question in terms of freedom of navigation, right? So why could not I don't know, a US or a French warship go through the Bosphorus and dock in the port of Odessa? There's nothing blocking that, of course, except, okay, the landmine or the sea mines are one thing, but because Russia is waging this war, that has other implications, and it really is a tricky situation. So the grain exports through the sea don't seem realistic. And in Europe, we have two different rail gauges. We have the Western European and the Eastern European. The Eastern European rail gauge is about 10, 15 centimeters wider. It's just a little wider rail gauge, which means the rail car cannot move from Ukraine into Poland without changing the rail car chassis or the entire rail car. And imagine thousands and thousands of grain cars having to, pour from one into another. It's an incredible time and money. It takes some grain has been exported now to Lithuania. It took more than 3 weeks. It's something that should take about a day and a half. It took 3 weeks because you have to go to a different gauge. But Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Russia all have the same wide rail gauge. So you could move the grain easily up to Latvia through Belarus, but then you have Belarus in the middle. So it's not only administrative. It is actually a physical difficulty of non-aligned rail gauges between Ukraine and, say, Poland, moving up to the Polish ports or the Lithuanian port. So it is a very serious difficulty. The way we see it is actually quite simply, Russia loses the war, Ukrainian ports are open, grain goes out. But that takes time.
Thank you. I mean, we should do a total different seminar just on this issue. This is so fascinating. We're running out of time, so I'll just ask you one final question, and that is the question of the Chinese. I don't know whether it's now 16 plus 1, 17 plus 1, 15, moves around. But how do you see 3C's initiative in regard to that? Is this a competing initiative? The 16 plus 1 has taken in non-EU members. Is that something 3C should think harder about? I'd just like to hear what's your standpoint as Prime Minister.
Yeah, as a Prime Minister, and I'm speaking publicly, so I'll try to speak a little delicately, and you can read into it all you want, and please do. My country, we think that Europe's relations with China should go through Europe and China, so 27 plus 1, and we're not very keen on these other numbers. And Europe, as the US, China is an interesting partner to work with. There are many aspects of that relationship, but Europe should work as a union vis-a-vis China. And regarding investment initiatives, well, I put full priority on the 3Cs. When you look at the companies coming into investing into Latvia, how shall I put it very clearly? We're very interested in clear investments. We're interested in no secret strings attached investments, and we're very interested in, shall we say, the OECD investments. Companies coming from countries that are working above board, visibly, transparently, that bring in the kind of culture that we have here, in terms of ethics and business culture. So the Chinese have this number plus 1. I think that should be superseded by Europe-China relations, so 26 and China. And 3Cs is where I see general infrastructural investment coming from.
Thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. And thank you for your government for everything that you're doing in the run-up to the 3C summit, and also clearly everything you're doing in regard to supporting Ukraine through this really, really dark period of time. I also want to thank our partners at the 3C House. Actually, we were their partners. They really were the pioneers of the 3Cs House in Davos, and that's the Polish Development Bank, BGK. It's just been an honor working with them. And with that, let me pass to Ian Brzezinski, who has been one of the biggest proponents in Washington, D.C. of the 3Cs initiative to moderate the next panel. And please join me and all of you with a virtual round of applause for Prime Minister Karinch. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. And let me thank General Jones. And of course, thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for sharing your time and insights this morning. That was truly a fascinating, and I think possibly news-making discussion. Fred said, I'm Ian Brzezinski. I'm a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, and I have the privilege of directing the Council's 3Cs programming. And it's a privilege for me to moderate our next panel, the economic potential of the 3Cs. You know, just looking back at this conversation, I just want to highlight what the Prime Minister Karins noted with Fred. He was, of course, very focused on the security situation caused by Russia's invasion and its implications for the geoeconomics and geopolitics of the region. But he said, despite that, Central and Eastern Europe remains a fantastic opportunity for investment, and then investments in his countries have been driving forward despite the circumstances. He noted the 3Cs initiative as a way to strengthen the transatlantic bond. And then I was struck by how direct he was in his support for Ukraine's candidacy for the 3Cs, saying that this is not only the right thing to do for Ukraine's European integration, but also a very pragmatic step in terms of getting ready for Ukraine's reconstruction and helping that reconstruction. As he said, it makes political sense, and it makes sense in terms of project development. General Jones made an important point about what makes the 3Cs initiative so effective, the power of collaboration. And Central Europe, of course, has been an economically dynamic region ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall. And the region, the 3Cs region, includes some of Europe's fastest growing economies with the highest rates of return for foreign and direct investment. I mean, just before COVID, Slovakia was providing an average annual rate of return for FDI of 12.3%. And the Czech Republic is 9.2%, Estonia 8.2%, Latvia 7.4%, Poland 6.4%. But by combining their efforts, the 3Cs democracies create a geoeconomic mass that enhances their attractiveness to investment. The 12 countries offer a combined population of 112 million, a combined GDP over $2 trillion, and a projected growth rate of the developed part of the world of 3.6% over the next 5 years. You add to that the rule of law and stability that comes with EU membership, and an infrastructure deficit estimated to be well over $500 billion, maybe $1 trillion, one can see an important dimension of the economic opportunity offered by this 3Cs region. We have a great panel to discuss that opportunity. And it is a panel comprised of senior officials from the United States, Latvia, and Lithuania, and senior investment executives from the United States. Ashley Carahan is the founder and chief investment officer of Linus Capital. Linus is a policy-driven hedge fund focusing on developed and emerging economies. And Ashley brings a background in addressing business problems in the context of global economic change, having senior positions in US policy metrics and UBS before she founded Linus. Adam Hitchcock, a long friend of Atlantic Council, a board member of Sovereign Infrastructure Group. He's been a managing director at Guggenheim Partners and also brings policy experience serving as the chief of staff of the Council of Economic Advisors in the White House. Eglė Markevičius is a vice minister of economy and innovation in Lithuania. Before taking on that very senior position, she served in the Vilnius city administration and ran her own consulting and lobbying business. And as Fred pointed out, she was one of the great speakers we had at 3C's House in Davos. Alan Meltzer, Deputy Director of the Office of Central European Affairs at the United States State Department. He's a career Foreign Service officer, having served across Central Asia and Russia. And he recently served as Deputy Director of Nordic and Baltic affairs. And last but not least, but also one of the hosts of the Three Seas Business Forum this June, is the Director General of the Investment and Development Agency of Latvia, Kaspars Roskāns. And his organization focuses on increasing Latvian exports, but also attracting foreign investment. And he served his country for his organization, his country, for a number of years, not only as a head of this investment and development agency, but also representing it in China and Germany. I'm going to lead a moderated discussion. I think it's going to be lively. If anyone in the audience has questions, just please use the Q&A button below the Zoom screen, and I'll do my best to kind of take them into account. Let me start on the government side, and I guess directly with Kaspars, since you're orchestrating the business forum coming up in Riga later this month on the 20th and the 21st of June. And why is it the world should see infrastructure in Central and Eastern Europe as an economic opportunity?
Yeah, thank you, Hein, for the question. Obviously, the infrastructure, the first thing is the Three Seas countries, 12 countries that are located from north to south of the Europe. The potential of investment there, or opportunity of the investment, is evaluated close to 600 billion euros. Therefore, if we look at the infrastructure side of it, obviously the infrastructure is the bloodline to support the economical growth. Therefore, if you lay down the infrastructure, the other businesses can connect to the infrastructure. And if we focus that the infrastructure is going to be future-proof, it means that we will lay down the infrastructure once for the next 20, 30, 50 years. We are being able to create a new type of economy, the economy that is actually resilient against different type of the crisis. For example, the one currently, the war that is going down in Ukraine. And this is I would say, the biggest potential. The spotlight is currently on the 12 these countries, and we haven't been seen maybe from the rest of the world seen well enough. And therefore, this is something we see that currently is the time is right. The growth is going to be there, and with this investment, the growth can be potentially way bigger than expected.
Great, Elge, you are Davos, and are you seeing Three Seas getting traction with the business community? Did you see that at Davos? Have you seen that in the evolution of the Three Seas?
Absolutely. First of all, good evening, good afternoon from very summery Vilnius. We're certainly not used to high temperatures here, and it seems that summer is certainly taking traction here. When it comes to traction regarding Three Seas Initiative and the Three Seas Initiative's investment fund, certainly we have to look at this from a business perspective within different sectors. Certain sectors such as transport, energy are very much involved, and they are very much involved in different projects with different countries. When it comes to digital area, certainly there are challenges. There are many opportunities in Europe. The IT market is overheated, just the way we are in Vilnius today, and there are challenges to overcome. Those challenges are mostly communication, PR challenges, tasks for our governments to overcome.
That's okay. Alan, you represent the United States, and what compels U.S. government support for the Three Seas Initiative, and where does the initiative fit in U.S. strategy for Europe and for Central and Eastern Europe specifically? And has Russia's invasion of Ukraine, has that added urgency to the U.S. relationship with the Three Seas?
Thank you for the question, Ian. Three Seas was already, a fundamental pillar of our strategy towards the region. All the members of the initiative are close U.S. allies and partners. Their security and prosperity are, closely, really intimately linked to our own. Our vision of Europe has always been one of a continent whole, free, and at peace, and the infrastructure deficit that some of the other speakers talked about, in a very real sense, represents the last vestige, the remaining legacy of Soviet domination of the region, something we want to eliminate once and for all. So so the initiative has always been, since its inception, a fundamental part of our strategy towards the region. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, of course, added a great deal of urgency to it. Obviously, all the forms of infrastructure that the three Cs would address, the infrastructure shortfalls, have important strategic and defense, components to them. And so certainly from a national security or international security perspective, these projects, the potential of closing this infrastructure gap would be very, very important to the security of the region.
Thank you. Yeah, let me turn now to kind of the private sector perspective represented by Ashley and Adam. One of the distinctive features of the three Cs is its effort to leverage private capital. It's all about leveraging the free market to serve as a catalyst and driver of infrastructure development. And so in order to be effective, it has to be able to attract that private capital, that international finance, that $1 trillion of foreign direct investment that circulates the globe every year looking for safe and profitable returns. Let me start with Ashley. Why should foreign investors, why should your world seriously consider the three Cs region and specifically the infrastructure opportunities that come with the three Cs initiative?
Sure, thanks, Ian. Well, I think we have talked enough about the opportunity part of this conversation, right? I would like to all say like the CEOs like C, E, and O, clarity, efficiency, and opportunity. And the opportunity, I think, is self-explanatory. I don't need to belabor the numbers. This is staggering numbers, and it should attract any sort of infrastructure fund or a long duration investor like pension funds or insurance companies, for example. I would like to make 2 points that I think would really take this initiative forward with accelerated pace, and that is the C and the E, which is clarity and efficiency. Clarity is the predictability of the regulatory environment that these investments are going to go into. As we all know, infrastructure and energy industries are heavily regulated. Like you have to be very close partners with the governments to actually do that and do that efficiently and get sort of the kind of predictability these long-term investors need. So that sort of anything that these governments can do to make sure that the investors understand that the rules will not change on them, that the political risks are removed, that any contract that these governments might commit to will not be changed under any circumstance, maybe guaranteed under international law, maybe could be, if there are problems arise, they could be sort of resolved in American or the UK courts, common law courts, for example, to attract Anglo-Saxon capital, things of that nature. Clarity is key. The other thing I think that the countries have done can do is the efficiency of how to coordinate for these investments. A central office could be very helpful. I mean, one can call it a secretariat. I would call it an investment office. Secretariat sounds more like sort of the NATO secretariat. Sounds more like a defense sort of idea. But like an investment office to coordinate all of the regulatory bodies within these countries with the government, sort of like to accelerate decision making, and also in terms of sort of like putting some guardrails for the investors in terms of the times that permits will be granted. If there are any environmental reviews or something, there are some time limits as to how this can be done. So if this clarity and efficiency concerns can be put in, I think there's a great opportunity here. I've already mentioned the long duration pension funds and infrastructure funds as key targets. Another area that I would add, especially now listening to the Prime Minister and the other panelists, distinguished panelists here, is the huge amount of ESG capital that is now flushing around the world, about $2.5 trillion. And what better social value than keeping these 12 countries plus Ukraine free and prosperous? I would consider that a social objective above and beyond anything else. So I would go to these countries, I would go to these investors and highlight what they can do for Ukraine. There's a huge public sort of outpour of emotion about what is going on in Ukraine. And this is the moment, I think, to tap into that ESG capital.
Well, that's pretty clear. Clarity and efficiency. You've raised the issue about a secretariat, and you've opened up an area that we haven't really, I think, thought too hard of ESG capital, although there is a dimension on cleaner energy that is part of that. Adam, you've been working in this realm for quite a while, infrastructure internationally. What do you find appealing about the 3 Cs, and what makes it relevant to your world?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Ian. I mean, you sort of, highlighted it just a bit ago. It's the combination of strong growth with rule of law, stability. It's part of Europe. There's a lot of factors, and as Ashley recommended, you could go on and on about why it is an attractive market for all those macro factors. I think everybody sort of sees now, and part of that also has been the 3 Cs initiative going out there and elevating the profile and helping people recognize the opportunity, because a lot of times financial market participants might not see these opportunities that aren't obvious. But then once they see them, it becomes obvious, if that makes sense. I think the thing that I think is also important is the next step of to continue to align the incentives for the private sector and for the governments that are involved. And I think that there's a number of things that they can do, because there are these shared interests that are already in place. So you don't have to stress it too hard, but I think that there are certain things you can do to really try to bring in the capital markets. And, like you have the 3SI fund, but I think there's other things that can also be done around, can these governments come up with creative financing? Because a lot of this financing, while the 3SI fund is great, that's a private equity fund. A lot of stuff is going to be financed through debt finance. And so how is it you can drive the capital market debt finance? Because a lot of these assets are going to probably continue to be owned by these governments, but can you put in place public-private partnerships where there's some sort of a governance element where the private sector can be involved a little bit more than just providing, financing for general obligation bonds. So I think continuing to further align the incentives between the private sector and the public sector is critical, because then once you start to mobilize that capital and you get some more momentum, it's easy, right? Once you've done one project in the country, it's easy to go back and do a second, a third, and a fourth. And most of these investments are going to be big ticket items. So people kind of want to have line of sight as to how they can do a couple different ones in the region, which then goes back to Ashley, what she was saying, because, we've talked about it before, Ian, is the use of a secretariat, or as she said, an investment office, to sort of play air traffic control on that. So I think there are a handful of things that they could do. They're actually low hanging fruit to really further align the incentives and to help mobilize that capital.
Let me take the points made by Adam and Ashley and kind of push them back onto Kaspers and Egle. Do you see the 3 Cs initiative actually starting to institutionalize itself, creating a secretariat so it actually becomes more of a 24/7 operation, has a more coherent marketing dimension to it, and maybe even taking on the role of starting to kind of coordinate different regulatory environments across the region to make it even more attractive to the likes of Ashley and Adam? Kaspers, start with you.
Yeah, obviously the joint coordination would definitely help, especially if we look at the cross-border investment projects. Then one of the most important parts there is the alignment, let's say, of the policies of different countries, because it's 12 different countries. So therefore we have a little bit slightly different interests. We have a different type of the challenges ahead of us, and therefore to align, let's say, the policies, this is definitely something that would improve and would help. And this is definitely on an agenda that we have to talk about. Because otherwise, if we truly wanted to create a big size tickets investment projects that are going cross-border and getting back to the efficiency part and make that efficient, this is something that needs to be coordinated on very high level. Let's say one of the Baltic country story is the Rail Baltic, where we have Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia joined together with the one office that drives the project further on, and that's huge investment project connecting three countries. And if we look at that experience, we have some lessons what we can learn from that. But if we want to scale the size of the projects across the 12 countries, this is definitely what we need to have. We need to have like a joint operations task force or whatever we will call that, and drive from there. Because on the digitalization, again, there's a different type of the protocols, and when you have an investment opportunity, you have to align the policies on specific protocols, what you're going to apply on different legislations among multiple countries, therefore making that investment way more efficient, and from that investment actually creating a lot of small investments and smaller co-investments and co-opportunities for the businesses. And this is something that we see. We have to lay down the big investment, big ticket size, and then the smaller businesses can join that and create side projects and grow from there.
Egle, would Lithuania support kind of a further institutionalization of the 3Cs initiative along these lines?
I can only add a few points to what has already been said by my Latvian colleague. Until now, the 3Cs initiative, besides events, besides the investment fund, has not had any institutional arrangements, institutional instruments. So purely from a managerial point of view, having such an instrument as the investment fund at hand requires certain service, and the secretariat or other institutional arrangement would greatly contribute to us using the opportunity that is ahead of us.
You know, one of the distinctive features of 3Cs is, of course, a 3Cs fund. And this is a fund that's created, as Fred mentioned, with $1 billion of contributions by the 12 3Cs member states. But what's distinctive about it is it's a fire and forget investment. They place it under commercial management. There's no political interference. The fund's guidance is basically invest into cross-border projects involving at least one 3Cs country and to return a profit. And that's pretty innovative. Adam, do you see this as a viable model? Is this something that is not only an effective approach, but is it one that will resonate positively across commercial markets?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what it is I think it's an important early step. Obviously, there were steps, a lot of, I know a lot of work that you guys did leading up to that. So there's a lot of work that went into getting it there. But I think beyond it, I think that the signal it sends is, hugely important. And the ability to use this initial fund as the way to sort of institutionalize, go further with the institutionalization is critical. Because I think at the end of the day, if you think about it, as I said earlier, like you do have this already sort of rough alignment of incentive, but what can you do to keep moving that along through institutionalization? Some of the things that we've talked about, because in both cases, these governments, as well as these investors, have a shared interest of bringing the capital markets, the global capital markets, to these countries, right? And the thing about the global capital markets are that they're a creation of the West, post World War II, in a positive way. They have things like rule of law, property rights, transparency. So by doing this, you're actually, and increasing this investment from them, you're going to not just improve the lives of these countries because of, the addition of new projects, but actually it'll also deepen global capital markets there, which will add other knock-on effects. So if the 3Cs fund is the first sort of step in the financial realm, if you will, because there's a lot of work that I know that you guys did to get it there, there's all these knock-on effects that I think we should be working towards. And I think the 3Cs fund, which is a great start, but it's a drop in the bucket, right? You need trillions of dollars, and a lot of that is going to be debt, not equity. And the 3Cs fund is going to be, a few billion, maybe gets up to 10 or whatever that is, but that's an equity fund as well. So there's a lot more that can be done, but this is a first step I think is really helpful as far as the institutionalization goes that a lot of us have been talking about.
Ashley, do you see this as a model that could be used in other regions?
I think it is. It has the potential to be a great model. I think the size is important. The fact that all countries contributed to it, along with the United States government, I think is great political signaling, and I think it is a great indicator that sort of this has particularly in a region like Central and Eastern Europe, has the sort of the political blessing and the political shield for the investments, and I think it's great. I agree with Adam that it is a drop in the bucket. It's a great start. And it gives us the opportunity to signal two things. Political risk is minimized. Number one, it has governmental support. Number two, great. Number three, investments have been made. So if those, hopefully, and I believe that will be the case, the investments are going to be supremely profitable, then you have great case studies that you can actually show people rather than talk, right? Like, this is what happened. These are successful exits. This is the kind of returns that has been actualized, not thought about, right? So that's great. Now, to make this model more successful, I think we can do two things. Two things can be done. Number one, I think this fund can be marketed more proactively to the type of investors who would like this kind of structure, which is basically a structure that is run by a commercial entity with no political supervision. So this is a great model, and I think more capital can certainly be channeled into this, and that I think would make it even more substantial and hopefully allow the fund to underwrite much larger projects through the region. So that's one model. The other model is that it's a model that has been successfully applied to other large economies like Australia, which is large funds coming in with their own due diligence capabilities and putting billions of dollars in. I think, the fund should have all of the look into that up to, if the investors are interested in that kind of a model, I think we should all welcome that, because at the end of the day, either model is fine. And either model has different, applications and investment targets. And the final point is this debt issue is very, very important. The capital markets, particularly U.S. capital markets, how big it is. U.S. Is dominated by capital markets, not through our banking system or investors, unlike Europe. And it is imperative that we develop debt instruments that is properly backed and guaranteed by the regional governments, so U.S. investors can actually be comfortable getting into these kind of projects. And this could only supercharge the 3Cs initiative fund. It could only supercharge it, because once you have the equity portion deployed through the fund, if you can raise billions of dollars through debt capital, that would, in a way that would make investors comfortable. I think that would open up a completely new pool of capital that should supercharge the investments in the region.
Alan, I see you nodding your head. Did you want to add to that? And you can guess I have a question for you on this.
Yes, thank you, Ian. I certainly agree with what's been said about the very idea that success attracts private capital, and so that as 3C starts to put some points on the board, starts to realize some of the projects, that in itself will be the strongest possible magnet for private capital.
Well, the question I had actually comes from an anonymous person here, but it's, what is the status of the U.S. commitment to invest in the 3Cs fund? In September of 2020, almost more than a year and a half ago, the United States committed to make an equity investment of $300 million into the fund. And that was a huge source of momentum, a boost for the initiative. But now it's been a year and a half. When will this be delivered, and possibly could be delivered at Riga?
Thank you. It's a very, very good question, the $300 million question, as they say. What the board approved back in 2020 was a loan of up to $300 million. And the terms of that loan are being negotiated now between DFC and Amber. Initially, maybe to back up a moment, DFC is limited in what it can invest in Europe, in high-income European countries. And essentially, in most of the countries of the 3Cs region, it's limited, for simplicity's sake, to clean energy projects. Early on, there were only 2 such projects in the pipeline that DFC thought it had the legal mandate to work with. And so it initially offered $125 million as a loan, and began negotiating with Amber on the terms of such a loan. Over time, more projects which meet its DFC's legal mandate, legal criteria, have come into the pipeline. So it is examining whether it can go beyond the 125 million, potentially up to the $300 million that its board has authorized. I'm not party to the negotiations with Amber, but I understand they're very far along and that there has been real progress. So we'll watch this space, but hopefully there'll be an opportunity for an announcement, maybe at Riga, maybe soon after, for closing on this DFC loan.
Kaspers, I want to turn to you in response to some of Ashley's ideas on how to supercharge the fund. You're on the board. Could you see the fund heading in that direction?
Yeah, I would say the combination was obviously investment in equity for investment projects and in combination with different type of the debt instruments. Obviously, we have to add because all three Cs countries are European countries. Therefore, quite a lot of different type of European funds are available for the most, actually, for the most projects there. And again, they're the European funds that are available mostly from the restructure and the resilience fund. They are structured. A big part of that is debt, but also a big part is also the grant funding. Therefore, if we looked at the 3SI projects administered by the 3SI fund, would focus on in combination with investment in equity and with this add-on from European Union on different type, that would definitely reduce the risk for the investors. And then if we can back up that combination, so the investment in equity, let's say grant support or loan support from the European Union funding, and then with additional debt instruments, that would definitely be on the supercharged level, especially if we look at the crisis now. We look at the energetic, the crisis in the energy sector that we have to solve. We have to solve it quickly. We don't want to, as a Europe, we don't want to go in the long-term huge crisis. We have innovation in place. We have to take the best what we have and then scale it up. And if this all would be able to align, that would definitely be on the supercharged level. And this is therefore the question: how big is the fund? Maybe is not the most important one. Obviously, it would be super happy, and that would make my day and maybe make my year if the announcement would be on US skin in the game in Riga. But on the other hand, even we look at the size, and maybe size is not there. If we combine the fund with the European instruments and with potentially new, let's say, debt instruments that would go across all the three SI countries, that would definitely be a supercharged level.
You know, I can't help myself, but there was a powerful dimension to Fred and the Prime Minister's conversation, and that was on Ukraine. And for me, I understand the geopolitical sense that it makes as part of bringing Ukraine into 3Cs as a full member, as part of its overall process of integration into a single European market, a single European geopolitical space, so to speak. But I want to think about a little bit about it from an economic sense and from a market sense. 3Cs is distinguished by being all EU member states. Ukraine is not quite yet a member state. It's on its route to be and should be. And I'd be interested in, I guess, turning to Egle first, does Lithuania support bringing Ukraine into the 3Cs?
Absolutely, without any doubt. I think we should, and Lithuania thinks that we should not only aim to embrace Ukraine as much as possible in the context of 3Cs initiatives, regional infrastructure projects, for example, look for ways to include their businesses in other European projects. I also agree with my Latvian colleague that we have to use all the tools that are available for us in order to build up the economic and ergo geopolitical resilience within the region. But we should also open our platform for Ukraine's participation one way or another. And also many countries, Poland does that, Lithuania does that. We should also, as the 3 Cs initiative, play quite a unique role in supporting the imminent recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine for the very same reasons of geographic proximity and affinity mentioned before. So this is very important for us.
So let me turn to Adam and Astley. Here we have a strong geopolitical imperative. If the 3 Cs were to bring Ukraine into its membership, how would that affect your perspective? How would that affect the perspective of private capital on the 3 Cs initiative? Would it help? Would it harm? Would it be indifferent? Adam?
I mean, I think it would help. I mean, the challenge will be obviously is it'll be hard for investors to fund, parts of infrastructure rebuild while there's an active conflict going on. But that said, it's obviously a large country. Bringing them in and integrating Ukraine more to the rest of the 3 Cs countries, but also more to the rest of Europe, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think there's a real economic argument for that. Doing investments into Ukraine will also, I think, require some creative sort of financing if you want to bring in private capital. So I think thinking of things where, could you get some of the outside governments to pledge, to support these projects, some sort of a reserve fund structure with some sort of guarantee, and then you can bring in the outside capital on top of that, and you can lever that sort of risk capital provided by the governments to then bring in outside capital. So I think there are ways you could do it that would actually make this attractive. And because there's clearly, a lot of countries have said they're committed to providing money to help rebuild Ukraine, significant amounts of money, well into the many billions, is instead of just writing a check and rebuilding bridges and things like that, are there ways you could do it where you say, okay, for certain types of projects, we will put up the risk capital and we're at risk because we're going to put that money there anyway. But then we can bring in outside capital. So say you use a reserve fund structure where you put up 10%, 20% of the money that's at risk, and then you bring in the outside capital above it, and then you can lever it, 5 times, 10 times for certain types of projects. So I think there's an opportunity to be a little bit more creative where you can have the governments take the first loss position as a way to crowd in capital, because there's this money that's going to go there anyway. So why not try to use it as a way to catalyze and, as Astley said, sort of start to drive the capital markets into these places, because that's the only way you're going to get these done, because the overall ticket size is just too massive to do it by governments writing checks by themselves.
Yeah, Ukrainian membership in the 3 Cs doesn't require or impose an requirement to invest in Ukrainian projects. It just creates a wider set of opportunities across the region. Do you agree with these points, Astley?
Yes, I think Ukrainian inclusion to the 3 Cs initiative brings 2 benefits. One, scale. The amount of infrastructure investment that would be required post-war, for lack of a better word, is immense. It's just immense. So it could bring it in, not to mention the population, not to mention the geographic area, the transport links that all of these distinguished panelists know very well about. So it brings even more scale to the initiative, and I think that would be a positive. The second thing that it would bring is, I would hope, that more sort of support and outright financial contribution from the United States and the UK governments. I mean, US government has authorized $54 billion to help Ukraine to date, and we're just starting. $40 billion is in military aid, of course, it doesn't really count. But we have humanitarian aid, we have investment aid, we have all sorts of packages flying through Congress on a bipartisan basis. So perhaps, $300 million of BFC, contribution or presumed contribution is a drop in the bucket. So maybe that could facilitate that kind of a conversation. That also goes for the UK, in my opinion. So again, we're not only talking about government capital, I'm fully aware of that, we're talking about private capital, but again, the attention that it would allow the initiative as a sort of a leading participant in rebuilding Ukraine, I think would be a great marketing point. So yes. And then on the private capital side, I very much agree with Adam. I think it would be also, create an heightened awareness among the 3Cs initiative countries to de-risk all these investments politically. So they would need to be even more forward-leaning, even more creative, even more aggressive, for lack of a better word, to actually de-risk this politically. Because if you can de-risk Ukraine, you can de-risk anywhere in that region. And so I think it would force all of us to think about more creative ideas as to how to make these investments attractive for investors. And I guess maybe it would be a bit harder in the short run, but in the medium term, I think it would benefit the initiative immensely.
You know, I'm going to give the last question to Alan before we move on to our next panel, but I've become convinced through this conversation that, you know, bringing Ukraine into the 3Cs is not only a moral imperative for 3Cs, it's also a real opportunity because it will enhance the relevance of the 3Cs. You know, it's almost a marketing move driven by strategic and moral imperatives. But Alan, if that were to happen, could that expand the U.S. relationship with the 3Cs? Could you see a more diversified, a deeper relationship, a deeper U.S. commitment to the 3Cs if this were to happen?
Well, what I don't want to anticipate something that hasn't happened yet. What is clear, as has been said, is that we have a long-term commitment to Ukraine's victory in this conflict and to its reconstruction, and that, you know, a great deal of money has been appropriated, and I anticipate that our commitment will continue for the long term. What has been, of course, allocated so far is not through the DFC. So whether, you know, if Ukraine were to become a member, there is certainly a possibility that 3Cs could be an avenue for additional U.S. support for Ukraine's contribution, reconstruction. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves and predict that just yet.
Thought I'd try. Well, this brings us to the end of our panel. Let me thank you all for your insights this morning. We had a good discussion on the opportunities of presented by the 3Cs, geoeconomically and in terms of business opportunities. We talked about some of the challenges and things the 3Cs need to do to get more traction, particularly in the private sector. And then we just had a good conversation, interesting conversation on the relationship between Ukraine and the 3Cs, which I think sets a great context for the next panel that's going to be led by Ambassador John Herbst, Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center and the former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine. Again, to my panel, many thanks. John, Ambassador Herbst, I turn it over to you.
Ian, thank you, and it's great to be here. So, are the rest of the panelists now with us?
John, I am here. This is
okay. I think
and also Paula Dobriansky's
yes,
here.
I think we've got everyone. We've got a terrific panel, as I think you know. We've got Dr. Poplovsky, we've got Maxim Timchenko, we've got Ambassadors Paula Dobriansky and Kurt Volker. So let's jump right in to the conversation. And Ian's panel and Ian's remarks have prepped us very nicely for it. So Dr. Poplovsky, the first question is for you. What role do you see playing in the 3Cs initiative? And is there support amongst the participants for that role?
Okay. Thank you for invitation to this panel. I really appreciate that the Atlantic Council promotes the project and is very active in developing and shaping it. So coming back to the question, I would say that this project was created in a very prophetic way, kind of prophetic way, and it's not too big word to describe it, because look what was its mission. Its mission was to connect the countries, which some of them don't access to the sea, to the 3Cs. So one Baltic, one Adriatic, and don't forget, and Black Sea, which is right now a battlefield due to Russian invasion on Ukraine. And that's how it should work right now. So if we succeeded before with developing connections between these countries, the grain export from Ukraine won't be any problem at that moment. Due to some bottlenecks, we have these problems, and we have to try to smoothen it very quickly to not to let Russia to play the grain card and conduct grain diplomacy and blackmail free and democratic worlds and for example North African countries. And I would say that there is 3 Seas countries are crucial for rebuilding of Ukraine, because and actually these two, the 3 Seas initiative and Ukraine, fits together like 2 puzzles. You know, it's strong connections, and we should really take advantage of these opportunities, because on the one hand, the 3 Seas countries have very good knowledge of transformation processes. And this is very, very, very precious knowledge, because Western European countries don't have this knowledge anymore. Let's look, for example, at Germany. They built the last motorway, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago. Right now, when they try to rebuild it, they have a lot of problems with dealing with whole bureaucratic process in the EU, which is very difficult. And we learned it 20 or 30 years. And it was very tough, and right now, after a few decades, we know how to do that, and we could share this knowledge with Ukraine, where they would also need connections, as Ukrainians said the last time. I could quote some data that about maybe 30% of the railways is already destroyed. So it is great loss for Ukraine, but also chance, because they want to rebuild the railways according to the European gauge, which is very important, because these changes of tracks, it's a very, very time-consuming process, which really is an obstacle for common trade, and that's why we cannot export so easily this grain from Ukraine. And on the Ukrainian side, we have very skillful, very motivated, very talented people, and they prove it every day of this fight. In this unjustified and unfair conflict. So I would say that there is very strong connection and complementarity between 2 parts. And if we use it well, and if we develop very good infrastructure, we will have a lot of productivity gains thanks to that. And the region, which has ambition to become one of the most important engines of growth inside the EU, because we already advanced to become an industrial engine, but we want more. We want to become also a digital engine, and we have also the skills to make it, because if you see in the ranks, even of Facebook, of Google, the programmers for Central Europe somehow always win all the competitions, you know, either from Czech Republic or from Ukraine or from Poland. They just very often, you know, just change the places. One is the person, the other. And if you ask about this support for the Ukraine being part of the initiative, I would say the dominant part of the 3 Seas initiative countries are really supporting Ukraine. Those are the countries who are constantly repeating that Ukraine needs to win this conflict. Whereas in Western Europe, we very often hear Ukraine shouldn't lose this conflict. And I always ask my partners from Western Europe, what that actually means, not losing the conflict. It's half or of the territory, or what? So we have also countries we have to convince. I would say that maybe Hungary, Austria, but I believe that's manageable, and I really count on US support, because the US was also a big stakeholder in this project, and it's also was giving a lot of political initiative to accelerate this project. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Poplovsky. Mr. Timchenko, as leader of DTEC, one of Ukraine's perhaps leading energy firm, what role do you see of Ukraine's participation in this initiative, and how would that help Ukraine?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting to speak from here, from Kiev, from Ukraine. Three Seas initiative at some extent was revolutionary back 2015 when they identified the need to run away from Russian energy, Russian dependence on Russian energy. And in my strong opinion, I don't see any way how this initiative in relation to energy security can be successful without participation of Ukraine. So what we have today and what we can offer today to these initiatives and in general to European Union. Since start of the war, more than 100 days, we demonstrate to the whole world that we not only good fighters on battlefield, but we also can, under such an extreme conditions, provide stability in our economy, so that the most in our energy system. So we managed to be synchronized with the European grid since 16th of March. Since that time, we provide stability not only to Ukraine but also to European grid. Moreover, from yesterday, when decision was made to start a gradual increase of export of electricity from Ukraine, now we're offering electricity, not asking to support us, and so that we avoid blackouts. We keep production of coal and gas, and basically we come to discussion at high level, strategic discussion about the role of Ukraine in energy security of European Union. And today we have great potential in basically all areas of energy industry or energy as a contributor to energy security. Starting from gas, I think that having more than 30 BCM of gas storage capacity in Ukraine, it's unavoidable for European countries and also for participants of this initiative to bring out gas storage capacity to the pool of all facilities and be prepared for the winter season in light of what Russia is doing with gas supply and gas prices. Then today, because of significant drop of gas consumption, we're in a position that we can be self-sufficient in terms of gas production, demand and supply in Ukraine. Of course, to be on safe side for the coming winter season, we need to keep importing gas from European countries. But talking about balance, we can presume that in 2-3 years' time, Ukraine will become an exporter of natural gas to Europe. That's very significant contribution to energy security. Then we can talk about renewables. Today, we have one of the largest potential in developing renewables in our country, starting from land and flat topography and connection to the grid, and basically our experience in developing renewables. So we bring the initiative to develop significant amount of renewable capacity in Ukraine to start exporting green energy to European countries. Then nuclear. You know that Ukraine is one of the most developed countries in nuclear technology, having 55% of nuclear in our generation mix. And now we're thinking to build more nuclear power units so that we can export it to European countries. And basically today, as I said, we already started commercial export, and we need to promote investments in transport capacity so that we increase it significantly, and all this clean energy will come to Europe from Ukraine. And I believe that the ideas and the goals of 3 Seas initiatives and coalition of the countries participating in this initiative should rethink about Ukraine and participation of Ukraine in this initiative. And as I said, to be successful, at least in energy security, and as one of the primary goals of these initiatives, Ukraine can be or should be part of it as a member of this coalition of countries promoting this idea of diversifying away from Russia.
Okay, thank you very much. Ambassador Dobryansky, how can the three C's contribute to the West's broader efforts to assist Ukraine in stopping, defeating Russia's unprovoked invasion, and also in Ukraine's reconstruction from the damage done by that invasion?
Thank you for the question. And first, really just a salute to the Atlantic Council for its efforts in support of the Three Seas initiative and its march onward in a few weeks to Riga, Latvia. So this panel is very timely. Let me address first the broad question of actually the goals that are being sought within Ukraine at large, and then just specifically your question about reconstruction. Clearly, politically, there is the goal of making Europe whole and free. I remember those famous words, and that's very much part of the effort now politically, and ensuring that Ukraine is sovereign and has its own territorial integrity and the right to choose in all spheres. Militarily, we know that we've been providing advanced weapon systems to Ukraine and for them to continue their very courageous and very steadfast and relentless fight. The third broad goal is economic. And actually, economic really matters here, and hence the connectivity broadly with Three Cs, and no less with reconstruction. But let me address it broadly. Broadly because, first of all, here, Ukraine is an integral part. It is resource-based, and not just only in the energy sphere, but as we know, it is rich agriculturally. And from that standpoint, many, many countries across the globe depend extensively on Ukraine for its varied resources. We know, for example, in a non-energy area, Egypt is very dependent on Ukraine's wheat and grain. And so here it's very crucial what we do in helping Ukraine economically, not only in reconstruction, but also what we help them now in terms of the open ports and facilities really matters. So economic modernization, and also, as Maxime just said, it's self-sufficiency. And that's not just only in energy, but just across the board, and modernization. Let me go to reconstruction. In reconstruction, there's a very, very integral relationship. And the reason why is because, as we already heard from Conrad and Maxime, one, the Three Cs initiative has the goal of connectivity. It emphasizes the importance of an integrated infrastructure. And also it emphasizes the importance of diversification and self-sufficiency. All of these are key presently for Ukraine, not only in terms of the need for it to be able to revive those parts of its energy sector that have been affected, those parts of its infrastructure that have been targeted and have been destroyed, and actually spring back. So I would say that here it is absolutely right what Ian Brzezinski said in the last panel. He actually said the timing couldn't be more opportune. It is an opportunity for all the goals and reasons stated. But you know what? He also used a word that I certainly subscribe to. It's a moral imperative. It isn't only the practical issue. It's a moral imperative of doing the right thing and bringing Ukraine into this sphere of the Three Cs initiative. Thank you, John.
Ambassador, thank you. Okay, Ambassador Volker, I think what Paul has said tees up your question nicely. How would Ukraine joining the Three Cs initiative enhance European security, if in fact it would enhance European security?
Great. Well, thank you, John, and thanks to the Atlantic Council for inviting me. And I send you greetings from Freedom Square in Tbilisi, Georgia, aptly named, and also on the front lines of dealing with Russia's aggression in Europe.
Amen.
So very happy to be here with you. I want to pick up something that Paula said that I think is important to remember. She said the goal is a Europe whole, free, and at peace. And Europe will not be whole if Ukraine is not a part of Europe. So this has to be a foundational principle now in response to Russia's aggression that we've seen. The Three Cs initiative was a great idea when it was launched in 2015. It remains a great idea. It has incentivized a lot of important work. it has attracted a certain level of resources. But I'd say three assumptions have changed now, or are now new things that we need to take into account in thinking about the 3Cs initiative, all due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The first is that Ukraine will survive as a sovereign, independent European democracy. There is no question about Ukraine and its position in Europe going forward. There were questions about that in the past, even talking with 3Cs initiative about association status or something else. It was a question mark. People really didn't know. Going forward, there is no question, and I have every confidence that at the EU summit, the 23rd, 24th of June, Ukraine will be granted candidate status, and there will be efforts underway then to make that a reality in terms of negotiations. It will take a long time, but that's the direction. So the first assumption is that Ukraine survives as a European democracy. The second assumption is that there will be massive funding for Ukrainian reconstruction and integration into Europe, funding that will dwarf anything that has been committed to the 3Cs initiative thus far. So instead of looking at 3Cs as the nest egg to protect, because it's a great idea and we managed to get it supported, we now have a tidal wave coming of funding for Ukrainian reconstruction. It's important for both Ukraine and the EU and for the 3Cs initiative countries for this all to be integrated, for Ukraine to be integrated into 3Cs, and that reconstruction funding for Ukraine to help build a stronger area of the 3Cs initiative than would have been the case prior to Russia's war. So that's a second assumption. And then the third assumption is about the structure of Europe's relationship with Ukraine going forward. There is a tendency to look at Ukraine in the past as different, as post-Soviet, as endemic corruption, as somehow Russia's territory, and that we can't act there in some way. That assumption has to be changing now. People have to look at Ukraine as a solution for European concerns, especially at a time when Europe has to unplug itself from Russia's economic engagement with Europe. Pipelines, gas, oil, other business engagement with Europe is ceasing because of the sanctions, because of Russia's war. Ukraine can replace some of this, as Maxim said, in the energy sector, in renewables, in gas, in oil, in nuclear generated energy exported back to the European Union. So taking advantage of these three things, that Ukraine will be there will be funding, and Ukraine's economy can support the European economy in many ways where it needs support, where Europe will be looking for this as it unplugs from Russia. This is an opportunity now. So as you get into the Riga summit of the 3Cs initiative, the opportunity here is to look at Ukraine as a booster, as a way of taking 3Cs to another level based on everything that has happened, but also in a way now that enfranchises Ukraine and will help with Ukraine's redevelopment and orientation into European institutions.
Kurt, thank you very much. That's great. Okay, Conrad, has Putin's launch of this major invasion had an impact on how participants look on Ukraine's possible role, perhaps along the lines that Kurt just outlined?
Of course. I would like to underline once more what Ambassador Volker said. That's free and democratic Ukraine. It's an absolutely crucial for us in Central Europe because when Ukraine is free and wins this fight, we will get rid of one of the largest security problems in the EU, of Russia, because Russia without control over Ukraine is not superpower anymore, and so we need Ukraine on our board to make the strategy of connecting Ukraine and disconnecting Russia until it changes for real, because Russia was affecting very negatively the whole EU project, because it was spreading here a lot of corruption practices, a lot of monopolistic and unmarket behaviors, destabilizing the politics of many countries with some fake news dissemination and spreading. So that's why we need to stop it finally, because we would like to make the EU project smoother and not only EU more united, but transatlantic ties strengthened. And if we look at the Ukraine, there is a lot of more specific and very, very concrete projects we could do together. I share the view of Mr. Timchenko that energy is such an issue, because the invasion, on the one hand, it taught us that we need more LNG, and right now the cooperations in energy LNG sector with the United States is flourishing. Yeah, even the countries which were the most skeptic, like Germany, they right now invest a lot. So it's also beneficial for both sides. Another thing is, of course, this nuclear energy, which was mentioned, because here we in Poland, we for years planning to develop the first nuclear energy in Poland. So the ways of cooperation between Ukraine and Poland in this matter are very vast, and we could do a lot in this cooperation. And one more thing that what we also expect from Ukraine is some, and I know it from our businesses when I talk to them, that we need to build upon this situation long-term business partnerships, because even if I talk to our logistic sector, they said, okay, we could invest a lot, we could help Ukraine with grain, yeah, we could even make some concessions on our business deals we have already, but we need some of long-term perspective, you know, because we don't want just to invest for one season, because those are big investments. So we need some time perspective. And second thing is this defense cooperation, because based on this defense cooperation, we see also many solutions in this war which are tested in the conflict and which can be used later on in the civic sector. So drones, many platforms for communication. We could make based on these very good defense partnerships, and on this defense cooperation later on support also some civic sector and some other businesses, private businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Conrad. That was very, very helpful. Okay, Maxime. One of the great steps forward for Ukraine in early days after the big invasion was its hookup to the European electricity grid. With that in mind, do you see any connection between participation in 3Cs and Ukraine's accession to the European Union? And might the first be a step towards the second?
Absolutely. I think that any political unions are based either on defense, security, or on economic interests. And I think in both aspects, Ukraine should play a very, very, very serious role in the future of European Union. And it's all about security. We can speak about defense. And basically, as Mr. Poplavsky said, Ukraine is fighting not only for our security and for our future, but for security of European Union. So, and Ukraine will be playing a crucial role in the security of the whole European continent and the eastern border of Europe. Then energy security. I already told that Ukraine should be playing a very important role in providing our resources, clean energy and gas and oil. Then food security. I think the whole world realized how important is Ukraine in food security for the world. And of course, it will be the same for European Union as one of the major supplier of agricultural products. Ukraine will play a role in supply chain security, so that we can localize a lot of productions and enterprises now in our country to supply goods and products to European Union. So all of this taken together, saying that Ukraine will play a very important role in economic life of European Union. And basically that create foundation for political unions and accession of our country into European Union. And I think that, as already mentioned, participation of Ukraine in 3 Seas initiative is very important because it can be faster and we can show all our contribution to European EU member countries to make them more confident about role of Ukraine in the future of European Union.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask Paula the next question, let me remind the audience, this is not just a watch event. We are taking questions from you. I'll be asking Paula a question, then Kurt, and then hopefully we'll have some audience questions. Okay, with that, Paula.
Your question.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, I got so tied up with that public service announcement. Okay, what message and signal should the 3 Cs send Ukraine and other countries within Eastern Europe that are not part of the initiative at the June 2021 Riga summit?
Thank you for that question. First, I would say a very broad and crucial message at this time is that energy security matters. And as we discuss what are the broad objectives for success in Ukraine and victory, it's not just only about the politics and the military situation on the ground, of course, the economics, but energy security matters. And this is where 3 Cs comes into play. So it has an opportunity to really highlight that, given the kind of aggression and also given the recent actions that have been taken against Poland as well as Sweden by Russia. So that would be the first. The second signal and message is with regard to Ukraine, that Ukraine should be in and embraced by the 3 Cs initiative. Ukraine itself can contribute. I think all of the panelists have well articulated the kinds of assets and resources that Ukraine brings to the table and why it matters for Europe's security as a whole, not only Ukraine, but also Ukraine can benefit from the association and the involvement, obviously in terms of modernization and in terms of also upgrading a number of the areas that are relevant and need to be upgraded. So I would just say the core message and signal, I think, is a vote of confidence in Ukraine, that Ukraine is part of a Europe whole, free, democratic, at peace. And then at the same time, that also here, that it's a real signal of being part of this very crucial effort of energy diversification and energy independence.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much. Kurt, the last question for me goes to you. In your view, does Moscow's February big offensive make 3 Cs and Ukraine's role in it more important? And if so, how?
Right. Well, thanks, John. I may have preemptively addressed that in some of my prior comments because I think it changes our assumptions that we now know that Ukraine is a part of Europe, that it is a part of the solution for Europe's challenges, including in energy, rather than a charity case. And we know that there will be massive support for reconstruction for Ukraine, which can help integrate the entire region, including Ukraine and the 3 Cs countries. So in that respect, Russia's war has been something of a benefit for the direction of the future. We had a lot of uncertainty in Europe and in the EU, in NATO. Well, what do? We don't want to provoke Russia. Well, Russia can't be provoked any more than they already are. We don't want to incur all these costs. Well, now we've decided we're going to have to incur them anyway. So a lot of this has already been advanced here. I guess the additional point I would say on this, and it's to pick up on, again, Paula's initial point of remembering what our goals are really, going back to the beginning. You know, when the Soviet Union fell apart, the Berlin Wall came down 2 years before that, we had a vision of reconstructing a Europe that would be whole, free, and at peace. We forgot a lot of the nations, the identities, the history. We forgot that, the Baltic states were independent in the 1920s before they were occupied in the 1940s. We forgot that Georgia was independent in the 1920s. We are rediscovering, we have rediscovered some of this, we're rediscovering more of this, but the solution is the one that was identified back in 1989 of a Europe that is truly whole, free, and at peace. If everyone can be part of a larger project, one that prizes peace, security, democracy, market economy, rule of law, that benefits everybody. If we don't hold everyone up to being a participant in that larger vision, then you create these gray zones where corruption, violence, or aggression can filter in. And I think we see that not only in Ukraine, but in Georgia, in Moldova, in the Balkans. And this is an opportunity that I think EU members, NATO members now have to seize to close these gray zones and really create the foundations for a Europe that's truly whole, free, and at peace.
Kurt, thank you for that. I'm going to step out of my role as moderator, just offer a thought, because it plays off what you just said. The folks who apologize for Moscow's aggression in Ukraine and in Georgia and in Moldova kind of think that these countries belong to Russia. And they say history supports that. But perhaps the preeminent historian of Central and Eastern Europe, Tim Snyder, has said on more than one occasion that Ukraine's history is very typical for Eastern and Central European nations. And the fact that Ukraine, like Georgia, like the Baltic states, was independent 100 years ago is further testimony to that. Okay, with that, we'll turn to the audience.
Can I add to that,
Go ahead.
John? I'm just
Go
going to
ahead.
key off you again. President Steinmeier of Germany said that Germany owes Russia a debt because of World War II and Germany's role. If anyone is owed a debt, the bloodlands and then the sacrifices that people have made and their recovery, it's the Ukrainians and the Poles and the Belarusians. They're the ones who are really owed the debt. Poland has made it, but we have to ensure that Ukraine makes it, and after that, Belarus as well.
And John, may I just?
Please, Paula, jump in. This is a big subject.
The point is a very important one in terms of history here and in terms of independence of various countries and nationalities and the distinctiveness of it. And I want to put in that there's also a very, very severe battle and a brutal battle of disinformation. And disinformation is out there, and historical revisionism, which undercuts the actual integrity of various cultures. The Ukrainian culture, the Ukrainian language, Ukrainian religions, all of these, as we know, have gone through, well, what should I say? When the statement's made that Ukraine is not a country, should I say it's absurd hearing that statement. So I just wanted to reinforce the point because it's not one that's often addressed, and it's crucial, and it has to be corrected, and it has to be stated and restated.
Absolutely. Okay, I'd love to respond, but let's turn to audience questions. So we have one for Ian Brzezinski. What examples of infrastructure projects should the 3Cs initiative pursue with Ukraine? Maxime, I'll give you a first shot at that.
As I already said, Ukraine is part of European energy grid now, but we have quite limited connection at the moment. So what is quite obvious for us, for Ukrainians, to be fully integrated and play more and more important role in security of energy supply, we need to invest a lot in infrastructure and in building new transmission lines and building flexible capacity like battery storage, so that from the sources of green energy we can produce in Ukraine, we are able to transmit this electricity to Europe. So that's from my side is a good example what we can do under this initiative right now.
Right.
Okay.
If I could ask.
Kurt, do you want to jump in? Oh, I'm sorry, Conrad.
Just maybe 2 or 3 specific projects. What I would like to promote. So first of all, I would say that this energy connection, energy wire between Poland and Ukraine, it would be very helpful for both countries, and it would play an important role in stabilizing the energy of European, but also of Ukrainian markets. Second thing, it would be the help to rebuild this normal gauge railway connection, at least with the most industrial Ukrainian centers, because we don't know how long we have problems on the Black Sea. And Ukraine has a lot of very precious goods, which it could export to the European, to the global market. And it's very difficult to make it only with lorries. We need trains because otherwise it would be very difficult. And we see it, we have calculations about grain, and taking it with lorries takes a lot of time, and it's so costly that actually it could make Ukraine bankrupt. And third thing, it would be some digital connections. Yeah, we need to think also about it, because it's also it could be an important driver for growth. We as 3Cs countries would like to develop digitally. We have as I said before, quite skillful programmers, a lot of digital companies. Just in Poland, we have a lot of big research centers of Google, of Amazon, of Microsoft. So we also need good digital connections to make new businesses and these digital businesses spreading in the whole Central Europe. So thank you.
Thank you. Kurt, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, John. I think the number one thing that the 3Cs summit should call for in this area when they meet is freedom of navigation and freedom to import and export in the Black Sea. It is outrageous that Russia is unilaterally undermining the Montreux Convention and freedom of navigation in the Black Sea in a way that Ukraine is not able to take advantage of imports and exports through its territorial waters and its sovereign territory. This is something, it is the 3Cs initiative after all. The Black Sea is one of them. The United States has stood for freedom of navigation for over 240 years as a matter of national policy. We should not be changing policy now. We should be demanding this freedom of navigation. And this is something the 3Cs initiative should get behind.
Okay.
The second one that I would mention, I just want to reinforce a couple points already made. Central and Eastern European countries, the 3C states, need to cut off Russian oil and gas imports. And they want to do it, but in order to do it, they need help and investment in Ukraine's energy infrastructure in order to be able to export electricity back to the European Union is critical for Ukraine, creates liquidity in the system. It's critical for helping the Central and East European countries get off of Russian oil and gas, and critical for the EU. So I think that is the second big area to focus on.
Okay, we've got 4 minutes left. What you just said about the food situation, opening up the Black Sea, speaks to a question from Alan Flowers. And he wants to hear a response from this panel to his earlier question about how to address the problem of those food exports from Ukraine. Kurt, can you do that in 1 minute?
I'm going to try. I think the way you do this is you get a global coalition, not NATO per se, but a global coalition. You get Turkey on board, and that will take some clever bilateral diplomacy. It intersects with some other issues like Swedish membership in NATO and with F-35s, but all of this should be on the table. But we get a global coalition. We exercise freedom of navigation with military ships in international waters, and we give the Ukrainians anti-ship systems to prevent any foreign vessels from threatening them from Ukrainian waters. It's risky, but I think this all has to happen in order to establish a principle that Ukraine will be able to import and export out of Odessa.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to take, we have one last question, a real big one.
I have my hand up. I just have a 30-second.
Okay, please.
30-second As I mentioned, food security before. Very quickly, global coalition is already forming. The issue needs to be spotlighted and raised that this is not just about Ukraine, but this affects the global community and famine in a number of areas. Secondly, I do want to say Turkey has already moved on its demining effort in the Black Sea area, which is really significant. And then finally, I would just say that here, what's also very crucial is that there actually be an effort to ensure that we do, as Kurt said, I'm reinforcing, provide the kind of equipment that's needed to ensure freedom of navigation there.
Okay, great, Paula. We've got 2 minutes. And I'm going to take the big question from Ambassador Mossbacher. What does Ukraine winning look like? Paula, in 45 seconds.
Ukraine winning looks like that they reseize their territory completely. Russian troops are brought back over the border. They seized the Donbass region, seized Crimea, that it is literally Ukraine whole and free and sovereign, and its territorial integrity is respected. And there are security guarantees that are provided to Ukraine going forward, and that Ukraine become a member of NATO.
Quick and comprehensive. Maxime, can you say in 30 seconds, anything to add to that?
Even shorter. I see Ukraine as a benchmark of green, clean economy, very technological and digital, as a benchmark how to build new economy in the world.
Thank you. Conrad, 30 seconds.
Okay, I would add one more thing to what Paula said. I would say that one more condition should have to be fulfilled. Russia must be punished, and it must be punished with disconnectivity. It should until it changes, it should have obstacles to access the European market and so on, because without that they are unpunished and they will repeat those.
Thank you.
Problems.
Kurt, you got the last 30 seconds.
Victory for Ukraine is the 5 of us on this panel sitting down for a glass of wine in Donetsk, talking to people who lived through it all and assuring them that their children and grandchildren never have to go through this again.
Is that in Mariupol or in Yalta?
That's in Donetsk.
Oh, Donetsk. Okay, that'll do. All right. Thank you all very much. We managed to do this on time. So, Ian, I turn this back to whoever's next, and whose panel is next.
Thank you, John, and thank you. That was a great conversation. That is our morning on the 3 Cs and economic potentials of 3 Cs. We reviewed where the initiative stands, the opportunities it presents for international investment, its geopolitical impact, and a really great set of conversations on the potentials of 3 Cs relationship with Ukraine. I thank you everyone for attending, and I hope everyone will be doing what they can to either join in person or watch the 3C Summit this coming June 20th and 21st. Thank you all.